My 15-year-old daughter sent me 4 words at 2:17 a.m. that stopped my heart. I'm going to find him. Him, the billionaire father who abandoned us before she was born. The man who chose money over his own child. And she was already on a bus heading straight into his world, a world that had no room for girls like her. I had 6 hours to reach her before he could break her heart the way he broke mine. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard, I thought it would crack right through. The room spun. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone as I read the words again, praying I'd misunderstood, praying this was some kind of cruel nightmare I'd wake up from. But the message didn't change. Judith, my sweet, brilliant, stubborn 15-year-old, had run away in the middle of the night with a backpack, a bus ticket, and the name of a man she had never met. A name I prayed she would never need to speak. Paul Guzman. My first love. My greatest mistake. And now, a billionaire CEO whose face I still saw on billboards, magazine covers, and late-night business segments. He didn't know about Judith. He didn't know about the night I left without looking back. He didn't know he had a daughter at all. And now my daughter had gone straight into his world. A world sharp enough to cut her, powerful enough to swallow her whole, and cold enough to treat her like a stranger. I stumbled out of bed, my legs barely holding me, and tore through the house, calling her name even though I knew she was gone. Her bedroom door hung open. Her bed was made neatly, like she'd planned this, like she'd thought it through while I slept 5 feet away, trusting her, believing we were okay. The guilt hit me like a fist to the stomach. Her closet was missing clothes. Her backpack, the navy one with the frayed strap, was gone. The little ceramic jar where she kept birthday money from her grandmother sat open and empty on her dresser. She'd taken everything she needed to disappear. I sank onto the edge of her bed, my chest heaving, my mind racing through every conversation we'd had in the past month, searching for the moment I missed, the warning sign, the crack in her voice when she asked about him. Because she had asked, just once. 3 weeks ago. Over scrambled eggs and toast, she'd said it so casually, I almost didn't catch the weight behind it. Mom, do you ever think about my dad? I'd paused, spatula in hand, my throat tightening. Sometimes, I'd said carefully. Why do you ask? She'd shrugged, picking at her food, just wondering. And I'd let it drop. God help me. I'd let it drop because I wasn't ready. Because I thought I had more time. Because I believed the life I'd built for us was enough. But it wasn't. And now she was gone. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and pulled up her location, thank God she hadn't turned it off yet. The little blue dot pulsed on the screen, moving steadily along the highway toward the city. Toward him. She'd taken the 5:30 a.m. bus. She had a 2-hour head start. My breath came in short, desperate gasps as I threw clothes into a bag, jeans, a sweater, anything I could grab. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My mind kept looping the same terrible thoughts. What if he rejects her? What if he's cruel? What if she sees him and realizes he's everything I told her he wasn't and blames me for keeping them apart? What if she never forgives me? I know some of you watching have lived this moment in some form. That gut-wrenching instant when you realize your child has made a choice that could change everything, and you're powerless to stop it. You can only follow. You can only pray. And if you've been there, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone makes the fear a little lighter. And if this story is speaking to you, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because this journey is just beginning. I wasn't ready to face Paul Guzman, but my daughter needed me. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and the last shred of courage I had left, and I ran out the door into the cold pre-dawn darkness. The engine roared to life beneath me, and I pulled onto the empty highway, chasing the taillights of a bus I couldn't see, racing toward a man I'd spent 15 years trying to forget. The road stretched out ahead of me, long and unforgiving, and all I could do was whisper into the silence. Please, God, don't let Paul break her heart the way he broke mine. Because I knew him once. I knew the boy he was brilliant, charming, ambitious, beyond measure. And I knew the man he became when ambition mattered more than love. When success mattered more than us. We met when we were 19, two reckless college kids, fueled by caffeine, late-night study sessions, and dreams bigger than the sky. Paul had this energy about him, this magnetic pull that made you believe anything was possible if he set his mind to it. He talked about changing the world, about building something that mattered, about leaving a legacy. And I loved him so fiercely it terrified me. But when I found out I was pregnant with Judith, Paul was in the middle of securing his first round of investment for a little tech company he was building in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. Every conversation we had back then ended the same way. Abigail, this company is everything right now. I can't afford any distractions. I became a distraction. My pregnancy became a disaster he didn't have time to manage. And instead of fighting for us, instead of choosing me and the baby growing inside me, Paul chose the company. He didn't say it outright. He didn't have to. I saw it in the way he flinched when I mentioned doctor's appointments. I heard it in the way his voice went flat when I asked if he'd thought about names. I felt it in the space that grew wider between us every single day. So I made the choice for both of us. I packed my bags before the resentment could choke me. My pride wouldn't let me ask him twice. I left campus, moved back home, and raised my daughter on my own in a quiet town where no one knew Paul's name or cared about his empire. And for 15 years, I thought I'd buried that chapter. Until Judith dug it up with her own 2 hands. The sun was just beginning to rise as I merged onto the expressway, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, another message from Judith. "I'm okay, Mom, I promise. I just need to know." Tears blurred my vision, but I kept driving. By the time I reached the city, my hands were cramping from gripping the steering wheel too hard, and my heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. The skyscrapers rose around me like steel giants, cold and impersonal, and somewhere among them was the empire Paul had built. Guzman Technologies. I pulled up the address on my phone, my stomach twisting into knots. The building loomed ahead, glass and steel stretching 30 stories into the sky, every inch of it screaming power, success, everything Paul had chosen instead of us. I parked in a garage across the street, my legs shaking as I stepped out of the car. The city noise hit me all at once, honking horns, shouting voices, the hum of a world that moved too fast for someone like me. I didn't belong here. But Judith was inside that building. And nothing, not my fear, not my pride, not 15 years of buried pain was going to stop me from reaching her. I crossed the street, pushed through the revolving glass doors, and stepped into the lobby of Guzman Technologies. The air smelled like expensive cologne and polished marble. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect. A massive portrait of Paul hung on the far wall, older now, broader in the shoulders, his jaw sharper, his eyes colder. He looked like a stranger. I approached the reception desk, my voice barely steady. "I'm looking for Paul Guzman." The receptionist glanced up, her expression polite but detached. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but..." Before I could finish, a security guard stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his eyes swept over me like I was a problem he needed to assess. "Are you Abigail Williams?" he asked. My stomach dropped. "Yes." His expression softened just slightly. "Your daughter is upstairs." The words hit me like a wave. Upstairs. Inside his office. Inside his life. "Follow me," the guard said gently. And I did. My legs moving on autopilot. My heart pounding so hard, I thought everyone in the building could hear it. We stepped into an elevator lined with mirrors, and I caught a glimpse of myself, tired eyes, messy hair, clothes I'd thrown on in the dark. I looked exactly like what I was. A woman who'd spent 15 years running, now forced to face the man she'd left behind. The elevator smelled like leather and expensive cologne, the scent of success I'd spent 15 years trying to escape. My reflection fractured across the mirrors, multiplying my fear until I had to close my eyes. The elevator climbed, floor after floor, each one pulling me closer to a moment I'd never wanted to live. And then I heard it. A small, trembling voice I would know anywhere, muffled through the heavy office door at the end of the hall. "Are you really him? Are you really my dad?" My breath caught in my throat. The security guard gestured toward the door, then stepped back, giving me space. I stood there, frozen, my hand hovering over the handle. And then I pushed it open. The office was massive, bigger than my entire living room and kitchen combined. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the city sprawled out behind them like a kingdom laid at Paul's feet. His desk sat in the center, sleek and modern, with 2 laptops, a stack of files, and a coffee cup still steaming. And there, standing beside that desk, was my daughter. Judith looked so small in this space, her backpack still slung over one shoulder, her hair messy from the bus ride, her eyes wide and red-rimmed, like she'd been crying. She stood there, chin lifted in that stubborn way she did when she was trying not to show fear, staring at the man across from her. Paul. 15 years had changed him. He was broader now, his shoulders filling out the tailored suit he wore like armor. His jaw was sharper, his hair cut shorter, threads of silver just beginning to show at his temples. He looked older, polished, powerful, every inch the billionaire CEO I'd seen on magazine covers. But his eyes, God, his eyes were the same. Dark brown, expressive, the kind of eyes that used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. And right now, they were locked on Judith with an expression I'd never seen before. Shock, wonder, something that looked dangerously close to heartbreak. Abigail? My name left his lips like a prayer, like a question, like a wound reopening after 15 years of trying to heal. I stepped into the office, every muscle in my body screaming at me to grab Judith and run. But I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. The past and present collided so violently, I thought the floor might open up beneath me. Mom, Judith's voice pulled me back, and suddenly, she was moving toward me, her face a mix of relief and defiance. I'm sorry, but I had to. We'll talk about it later, I said quietly, reaching for her, needing to touch her, to know she was safe. My hands found her shoulders and I pulled her close, my heart still hammering in my chest. But Judith didn't melt into my arms the way she used to when she was little. She stood stiff, her eyes darting between me and Paul like she was trying to figure out how all the pieces fit together. Paul took a step forward, then stopped, like he wasn't sure he had permission to come closer. Abigail, he said again. And this time his voice was steadier. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. The words hung in the air between us. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that of course he didn't know, because he'd made it impossible to tell him. Because he'd chosen his company over us before I even had the chance to ask him to choose differently. But Judith was watching, and I couldn't unload 15 years of pain in front of her. I know, I said instead, my voice barely above a whisper. She shouldn't have come here. I'm taking her home. No. Judith pulled away from me, her eyes flashing with that fire I recognized from every argument we'd ever had. I'm not leaving. Not yet. Paul's eyes met mine, and for just a second, I saw the boy I used to know buried beneath the man he'd become. The boy who used to stay up until 3 a.m., studying with me. The boy who used to kiss my forehead and tell me we were going to change the world together. The boy who broke my heart when the world became more important than me. Please, Paul said softly. And I wasn't sure if he was talking to me, or Judith, or both of us. Just let me explain. Behind him, the city stretched endlessly, glittering and cold and beautiful. This was his kingdom, his empire, everything he'd sacrificed us to build. And now, standing in the center of it, he looked more lost than I'd ever seen him. Judith crossed her arms, planted her feet, and said the words that would change everything. I want to hear it. I want to hear everything. We sat across from each other, Judith between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. The silence stretched thin and fragile, weighted with everything we'd never said. Paul's eyes kept drifting to Judith, studying her face like he was searching for pieces of himself hidden in her features. And God help me, he found them. She had his eyes, the same deep brown that used to look at me like I hung the moon. She had his stubborn jaw, the one that set hard when he was determined about something. Even the way she sat, spine straight, chin lifted, that was pure Paul Guzman. You look just like her, Paul said softly, his voice cracking on the last word. Judith's expression flickered surprise, maybe even pleasure, but she didn't let her guard down. How would you know? You weren't there. The words landed like a slap. Paul flinched, and I saw something break behind his eyes. You're right, I wasn't. Judith, I started, but she cut me off. No, Mom, I need to know. She turned back to Paul, her hands clenched in her lap. Why didn't you look for us? If you loved my mom like she said you did, why didn't you try to find her? The question I'd asked myself 1,000 times in the dark. Paul leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together like he was praying for the right words. Because I didn't know she was gone until it was too late. And by the time I figured it out, I thought she wanted it that way. That's not, I started, but he held up a hand. Let me finish, please. I bit my tongue and nodded. Paul looked at Judith, his expression raw and unguarded in a way I'd never seen from him. Your mother and I met when we were kids, 19. Barely adults. Thinking we had the whole world figured out. I was obsessed with building a company that mattered, and she was the only person who believed I could actually do it. He glanced at me, and for just a second, I saw the boy I used to know. But when she got pregnant with you, he continued, his voice dropping, I panicked. I was in the middle of pitching investors, sleeping 3 hours a night, living off ramen and coffee. I told myself I didn't have time for distractions. And that's exactly how I made her feel, like she and you were distractions, instead of the most important things in my life. Judith's expression softened just slightly, but she didn't speak. Your mom left without telling me where she went, Paul said. And I was too proud and too stupid to chase her. I told myself she'd come back when she was ready. But she never did. And when I finally went looking for her, she disappeared so completely it was like she'd never existed. You could have tried harder, Judith said, her voice trembling. You're right, Paul's voice broke. I should have turned the world upside down to find you both, but I didn't, and that's on me. The honesty in his voice surprised me. The old Paul would have made excuses, would have blamed circumstances or timing, or anything but himself. But this Paul, older, weathered by 15 years of choices and consequences, owned every word. Do you have other kids? Judith asked suddenly, and I saw Paul's breath catch. No. The word came out firm, certain. No other kids, no wife, no one. Judith studied his face, searching for lies the way I used to. Why not? Paul's smile was sad and self-aware. Because I built an empire, and forgot to build a life. And now I'm 40 years old, sitting in an office that feels emptier every year, realizing I sacrificed the wrong things. The weight of that confession settled over all of us. Judith's voice came out smaller than before. Did you ever think about me? Even when you didn't know I existed? Paul's eyes filled with tears. He didn't bother to hide. I thought about your mother every single day. I thought about what our life could have been, what our family could have looked like. So yes, sweetheart, I thought about you. I just didn't know you were real. Something shifted in Judith's expression, the hard edges softening, the anger giving way to something more fragile. I would have ruined everything back then, Paul said, looking at me now. Abigail, if you had told me, I might have resented you both. I might have blamed you for derailing my dreams. You were right not to tell me. You did what you had to do to protect yourself and Judith. I respect that. The apology I'd never let myself hope for. My throat tightened, tears burning behind my eyes. We were kids, Paul. We're not kids now. His voice was steady, grounded. And I can't change the past. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try to be the father she deserves, even if I'm 15 years too late. Judith looked at me, her eyes searching mine for permission I didn't know how to give. Then she turned back to Paul, and I watched her make a decision that terrified me. She reached out her hand. Paul stared at it for a long moment, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then, slowly, carefully, like he was holding something precious and breakable, he took her hand in his. The first touch, the first connection. And I watched my daughter's face transform, relief, wonder, something that looked dangerously close to hope flooding her features. I have so many questions, Judith whispered. Paul's voice was thick with emotion. I have 15 years to make up for. Ask me anything. They sat like that, hands clasped, and I felt like I was watching a door open that I'd kept locked for so long I'd forgotten what was on the other side. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Judith asked him everything. What he did for work, where he lived, what he liked to eat, if he played sports, if he listened to music. And Paul answered every question with patience and honesty that surprised me. Finally, Judith glanced at her phone and her eyes went wide. It's almost noon. I was supposed to be at school. Reality came crashing back. We should go, I said quietly, standing up. My legs felt shaky, my heart still racing from everything I'd just witnessed. Judith stood too, reluctance written all over her face. Can I come back to see you again? Paul looked at me, waiting for permission he desperately wanted. And that's when I saw it. The vulnerability beneath the billionaire exterior. The regret, the longing, the fear that I'd say no and take away the daughter he just met. "We'll talk about it," I said carefully. Judith grabbed her backpack and headed toward the door, but Paul stood and called after her. "Judith?" She turned back. "Thank you," he said softly, "for finding me, for giving me a chance I don't deserve." Judith's smile was small but genuine. "You're welcome, Dad." The word hung in the air like a benediction. She walked out into the hallway, leaving Paul and me alone for the first time in 15 years. He took a step toward me, his expression stripped of every defense. "Abigail, please, don't take her away yet. I know I have no right to ask, but, Paul, I'll do whatever you need, whatever makes you comfortable. I can't lose her now that I know she exists. Please." The desperation in his voice broke something open inside me. I looked at this man, this stranger who used to be everything to me, and I saw the truth written all over his face. He wasn't asking for a second chance with me. He was begging for a first chance with our daughter. And maybe, just maybe, he'd finally grown into someone who deserved it. "One step at a time," I said quietly. "We'll figure it out." Relief flooded his face. "Thank you." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. "Abigail?" I looked back. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of it. For not being there. For not fighting harder. For not being the man you needed me to be." The apology I'd waited 15 years to hear. I nodded once, my throat too tight to speak, and walked out of his office into the hallway where Judith stood waiting. As we stepped into the elevator, I glanced back one last time and saw Paul standing in his office doorway, watching us leave. And for the first time since that terrifying text at 2:17 a.m., I wondered if maybe, just maybe, running away was the bravest thing my daughter had ever done. 3 days passed before Paul called. 3 days of Judith asking questions I didn't have answers for. 3 days of me lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in that office. 3 days of trying to reconcile the boy I once loved with the man sitting across from me in that impossibly expensive suit. When his name lit up my phone screen, my heart stopped. "Abigail," he said when I answered, his voice careful, respectful. "I was hoping, could we talk? Just the two of us. Before Judith and I see each other again, I'd like to explain some things, if you're willing." I should have said no. I should have kept the boundaries firm, kept my distance, protected the fragile peace we'd barely started building. But I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard in 15 years. Humility. "Tomorrow," I said. "Noon. The coffee shop on Maple Street. Neutral ground, public space, somewhere I could leave if I needed to." "I'll be there," he said quietly. "Thank you." I arrived early, choosing a corner table near the window where the afternoon light poured in warm and golden. My hands wrapped around a coffee cup I hadn't touched, and I watched the door like I was waiting for a ghost. When Paul walked in, he looked different. No suit this time. Just jeans and a simple blue sweater that made him look softer, younger, more like the boy I remembered. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. And when his eyes found mine across the room, I saw exhaustion etched into every line of his face. He slid into the chair across from me, ordered black coffee from the waitress, and folded his hands on the table between us. "Thank you for coming," he said. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. Paul exhaled slowly, like he'd been practicing this conversation in his head and couldn't quite find the right starting point. "I need you to understand something about the man I was back then, the boy you left. Paul, please, let me say this." I fell silent. "When we were 19, I was terrified," he said quietly. "Terrified I'd fail. Terrified I'd end up like my father working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Too tired to dream. Too broken to hope. I watched him die at 52 from a heart attack brought on by stress and exhaustion, and I swore I'd never let that happen to me. I'd forgotten about his father, forgotten the weight Paul carried even back then. So I poured everything into that company," he continued. "Every waking hour, every ounce of energy. I told myself if I could just make it successful enough, I'd never have to be afraid again. And when you told me you were pregnant," his voice cracked, "I panicked. Because all I could see was my father's life repeating itself, responsibilities I wasn't ready for, Dreams dying before they'd even had a chance to breathe. And instead of trusting you, instead of believing we could build something together, I pushed you away." The honesty in his voice stripped away 15 years of my carefully constructed anger. "I became exactly what I was afraid of," Paul said. "A man who sacrificed everything that mattered for success. I built an empire, Abigail, but I did it alone. And every year that passed, that office got bigger and emptier, and I couldn't figure out why nothing felt like enough." He looked out the window, his jaw tight. "I worked 16-hour days, slept at the office more nights than I slept at home. Missed holidays, birthdays, every moment that makes a life worth living. I told myself it was worth it, that I was building something important. But the truth is, I was running from the choice I made when I let you go." The waitress set his coffee down, and Paul wrapped his hands around it like he needed something to hold on to. "I didn't look for you because I was ashamed," he admitted. "Because deep down, I knew you were right to leave. I knew I would have resented you both back then, and I couldn't stand the thought of you seeing me become that person." My throat tightened. "Paul, but I kept your photo," he said suddenly, reaching into his wallet. He pulled out a worn, faded picture of the two of us at 19, laughing on the quad, his arm around my shoulders, my head thrown back in joy. My breath caught. "I kept it in my desk drawer for 15 years. He said softly. "Every time I wanted to quit, every time I thought about giving up, I'd look at this and remember what I was working for. I told myself I was building something that would make you proud, even if you never saw it." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Paul said, his voice breaking. "I'm just asking you to understand that the man I was, he was broken and scared and too young to know what mattered. But the man I am now?" He looked at me with those same brown eyes I used to love. "I would give it all up, every building, every dollar, every achievement for the chance to know my daughter, for the chance to be the father she deserves, even if I'm 15 years too late. You know, there's something powerful about watching someone take full responsibility for their mistakes. No excuses, no blame, just raw honesty. And I think that's what we all hope for deep down, not perfection, but genuine accountability. If this story is resonating with you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had someone apologize to you after years of silence? How did it change you? I read every comment, and your stories inspire me more than you know. The apology settled between us like a bridge I didn't know how to cross. Before I could respond, the door chimed, and Jessica, Paul's assistant, walked in with Judith beside her, both laughing about something. They spotted us, and Judith's face lit up. "Mom, Paul, what are you doing here?" Jessica smiled warmly at me. "Your daughter is wonderful, Miss Williams. She's been asking questions all morning that would make a marine biology professor proud." She turned to Paul. "I'll leave you three to catch up. Judith, it was a pleasure." As Jessica headed out, I caught her giving Paul a small, approving nod, like she was seeing a side of him she'd been hoping would show up. Paul gestured to the empty chairs. Jessica was giving Judith a tour of the rooftop garden at the office. Judith slid into the seat beside me, still glowing with excitement. "Mom, you should see it. There's a whole garden up there, herbs and flowers and these beautiful benches where people eat lunch. Paul designed it himself." I looked at Paul, surprised. He shrugged. "Turns out, money can't buy happiness, but a garden helps." Judith peppered him with questions about the company. About his apartment? About what he did in his free time. And Paul answered every one with patience and warmth that surprised me. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just present, fully, completely present in a way I'd never seen him be with anyone. After an hour, Judith excused herself to the restroom, and Jessica followed to take a phone call outside. Paul and I sat in the sudden quiet. "She's remarkable," he said softly. "Smart, curious, brave. You raised her beautifully, Abigail." The compliment landed softly, unexpectedly. "I did my best," I said. "It shows." He paused, then leaned forward. "I know I have no right to ask this, but could we try to co-parent? To build something for her that she deserves?" "Paul, I'm not asking to erase the past," he said quickly. "I'm not asking you to trust me overnight. I'm just asking for the chance to show you, and her, that I can be different now. I looked at this man, this stranger who used to be everything, and I saw something I never expected. Growth. One step at a time, I said carefully. Relief flooded his face. One step at a time. Judith returned, and the conversation shifted back to lighter things. But as I watched Paul laugh at something she said, watched him lean in when she spoke like her words were the most important thing in the world, I felt something shift inside me. The anger I'd carried for 15 years began to loosen its grip. Not forgiveness, not yet. But something softer, something that felt dangerously close to hope. As we stood to leave, Paul touched my arm gently. Abigail, could we start over? Not as lovers, as parents first, for her. The question hung in the air between us. I looked at Judith, chatting animatedly with Jessica by the door. I looked at Paul, vulnerability written all over his face. And I realized something I'd been too afraid to admit. Maybe the man standing in front of me wasn't the boy I left behind. Maybe he'd finally grown into the man I always hoped he'd become. We'll see, I said softly. But for the first time in 15 years, I didn't say no. The drive home from the coffee shop was quiet in a way that made my chest ache. Judith sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing street lights, her fingers tapping against her phone screen. She wasn't texting anyone, she was just distant. Like part of her mind had stayed behind in that glass tower with Paul while her body came home with me. I wanted to ask her what she was thinking. I wanted to pull over and hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But the truth was, I didn't know if it would be, and the silence between us felt too fragile to break. When we pulled into our driveway, the modest two-bedroom house with a chipped paint in the garden, I never had time to tend. Judith unbuckled her seatbelt and said quietly, "Thanks for letting me see him, Mom." Like I'd given her permission for something optional, instead of watching her claim a piece of herself I'd kept hidden for 15 years. "Of course," I said, my voice tight. She went inside without looking back. That night, I made her favorite dinner, chicken parmesan with garlic bread and the salad she always picked the tomatoes out of. I set the table the way I always did, with the good plates and cloth napkins, trying to create normalcy in a week that had turned our entire world upside down. But Judith barely touched her food. She pushed pasta around her plate, answering my questions with one-word responses, her mind clearly somewhere else. Somewhere I wasn't invited. "Judith," I said finally, setting down my fork. "Talk to me." She looked up, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not defiance. Something deeper. Longing. "Mom," her voice cracked. I feel like half of me woke up for the first time. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I already knew. Even though I'd been terrified of this exact moment since the second she ran away. Judith's eyes filled with tears. I spent my whole life feeling like something was missing. Like there was this empty space inside me I couldn't fill no matter how hard I tried. And then I met him, and suddenly, I understood why. My throat tightened. "Sweetheart, I'm not saying you weren't enough," she said quickly, reaching across the table to grab my hand. "You were everything, Mom. You still are. But meeting Paul, it's like finding a piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was missing." I blinked back tears, trying to hold myself together. "I understand." But I didn't. Not really. Because what I heard beneath her words was the thing every single mother fears. That someone else could give her daughter something I couldn't. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Judith moving around in her room. The fear wrapped around my chest like a vice, squeezing tighter with every breath. What if she chooses him? What if Paul's world with its penthouses and rooftop gardens and endless possibilities makes our life look small and insufficient? What if I lose her to the man who already took 15 years from us? My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Paul. "Thank you for today, for giving me a chance I don't deserve. I know this is complicated for you. I'm here if you need to talk." The message was respectful, careful, patient. Everything the old Paul wasn't. I stared at it for a long time before typing back, "One step at a time." His response came immediately, "One step at a time." Over the next week, Paul called every evening at 7. Not to talk to me though, he always asked how I was doing first, but to talk to Judith. And every night, I'd watch her face light up as she disappeared into her room, her laughter floating through the walls like music I'd never heard before. She told him about school, about her friends, about the college essay she was working on, about her dreams of becoming a marine biologist and studying coral reefs. And Paul listened. I could hear it in the pauses, in the way Judith's voice softened when she spoke to him, in the way she'd come out of her room, glowing with a happiness I couldn't quite touch. On Friday night, Judith came into the kitchen where I was washing dishes and said, "Mom, I need to ask you something." I dried my hands on a towel, bracing myself. "Okay." Paul invited me to spend next week at his place. He wants to show me his world, meet his staff, let me see what his life is really like. She paused, her eyes searching mine. "Can I go?" The question hung in the air between us. Every instinct in my body screamed no. Every protective impulse I'd honed over 15 years of single parenting wanted to pull her close and keep her safe in the world I'd built for us. But then I looked at her face, hopeful, nervous, waiting, and I realized something that broke my heart and set it free at the same time. This wasn't about me. This was about her right to know her father, her right to make choices about her own life, her right to build bridges I'd never given her permission to cross. "If it's what you want," I said quietly. Relief flooded her face. "Really? Really?" I swallowed hard. "But you check in with me every day, morning and night. And if anything feels wrong or uncomfortable, you call me immediately, and I'll come get you. No questions asked." Judith threw her arms around me. "Thank you, Mom, thank you." I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, memorizing the weight of her in my arms. "I love you," I whispered, "more than anything in this world." "I love you too," she said. "Always." But as I watched her pack her bag that Sunday afternoon, carefully folding clothes, choosing outfits, buzzing with excitement, I felt something inside me crack. She was leaving. Not permanently, not forever, but leaving nonetheless. And I had to let her go. Paul picked her up at noon, in a car that probably cost more than my house. He walked her to the door, shook my hand with genuine respect, and promised to take care of her. "I'll bring her home safely," he said. "You have my word." I nodded, not trusting my voice. And then they drove away, and I stood in the doorway of my empty house, feeling more alone than I had in 15 years. The week crawled by. Judith texted me pictures of Paul's penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the office, rooftop garden, fancy dinners at restaurants I couldn't pronounce. She told me about meeting his staff, about sitting in on a board meeting, about the life he'd built. And every picture, every text, felt like watching her step further into a world I'd never be part of. On Friday evening, Paul's car pulled into my driveway, and Judith jumped out, practically glowing. She hugged me tight, chattering non-stop about everything she'd seen and done, her eyes brighter than I'd seen them in years. We sat on the couch together, and she showed me more pictures, telling me stories about Paul's chef who made her favorite meals, about his view of the sunrise, about the conversations they'd had late into the night. And then she said it. The words I'd been dreading all week. "Mom." She looked at me with eyes full of wonder and something that felt like betrayal. "He's nothing like you said, he's better." The sentence landed like a grenade. Better. Not different, not surprising, better. Better than the man I'd painted him to be. Better than the villain I'd needed him to be to justify leaving. Better than the story I'd told myself for 15 years to make the pain bearable. I smiled, even though my heart was breaking. "I'm glad, sweetheart," I said. "I'm glad you got to see that for yourself. Because that's what mothers do. We hold our pain quietly, so our children can soar freely, even when it costs us everything." After Judith went to bed that night, I sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of tea I didn't drink, staring at the words she'd said on repeat in my mind. "He's nothing like you said. He's better. Better." The word carved itself into every wound I'd spent 15 years trying to heal. Because if Paul was better now, what did that make me? The woman who ran instead of staying? The woman who kept a father from his daughter because I was too hurt, too proud, too afraid to give him a second chance? I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they came anyway. Silent, hot, bitter tears for the girl I used to be, and the choices I'd made that seemed so clear back then and so complicated now. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Paul. Abigail, I know this week was hard on you. Would you be willing to have dinner with me tomorrow? Just us. No, Judith. I think we need to talk, really talk about what happens next. No pressure. Just honesty. I stared at the message for a long time. Every instinct told me to say no, to keep my distance, to protect what was left of the walls I'd built around my heart. But maybe it was time to stop running. I typed back, okay, where? His response came quickly. My place, 7 p.m. I'll cook. Nothing fancy. Just us talking like we should have 15 years ago. The next evening, I stood outside Paul's building, feeling like I was about to walk into enemy territory. The doorman recognized me this time, greeting me by name and directing me to the private elevator that went straight to the penthouse. The ride up felt like ascending into another world. When the doors opened, Paul was waiting. He wore jeans and a simple gray Henley, no suit, no armor, and his smile was tentative, nervous, real. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for inviting me, I replied, stepping into the apartment. The penthouse was exactly what I'd imagined. From Judith's pictures, floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the city lights, modern furniture that probably cost more than my car, everything polished and perfect. But there were also small details I hadn't expected. Books stacked on the coffee table, a blanket draped over the couch arm, Judith's backpack sitting by the door. Signs of life, signs of her. I made pasta, Paul said, leading me to the dining area where a simple table was set for two. Nothing fancy. Just the kind we used to make in college when we were broke. The memory hit me unexpectedly late nights, in his cramped apartment, boiling water on a hot plate, laughing over cheap wine and cheaper pasta. We sat down, and for a few minutes, we ate in comfortable silence. Then Paul set down his fork and looked at me with those same brown eyes that used to see right through me. I need to apologize, he said, for real this time, not just for not being there, but for making you feel like you had to leave. I opened my mouth to respond, but he held up a hand. Let me finish, please. I nodded. When you told me you were pregnant, I should have celebrated. I should have wrapped my arms around you and told you we'd figure it out together. Instead, I made you feel like a problem I didn't have time to solve. His voice cracked. I was so terrified of becoming my father dying young from stress and responsibility that I became something worse. I became a man who abandoned the woman he loved and the child he didn't even know he wanted. Tears burned behind my eyes. Paul, why did you leave without telling me where you went? He asked softly. Why didn't you give me a chance to fix it? The question I'd known was coming. I set down my fork, my hands trembling. Because I saw your face when I told you. I saw the panic, the resentment. The way you looked at me, like I'd just destroyed your future. And I couldn't. I couldn't watch you resent our baby the way your father resented his life. Paul flinched, like I'd slapped him. I left because I loved you too much to watch you become someone you'd hate, I continued, my voice breaking. And I loved our daughter too much to let her grow up feeling like she was the reason her father's dreams died. God, Abigail. Paul's voice was raw. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Then why didn't you fight for me? The question I'd carried for 15 years finally broke free. Why didn't you come after me? Why didn't you look harder? Paul's eyes filled with tears. Because I thought you were better off without me, I thought. I thought you deserved someone who would choose you first instead of making you compete with ambition. So I let you go and told myself it was mercy when really, it was cowardice. The honesty between us felt like standing in the middle of a storm, terrifying and cleansing at the same time. What do you wish you'd done differently? I asked quietly. Paul didn't hesitate. Everything. I wish I'd told my investors to wait. I wish I'd put my hand on your stomach and felt our daughter kick. I wish I'd been there when you were scared and alone. I wish I'd chosen love over success. He paused. What about you? I swallowed hard. I wish I'd been braver. I wish I'd fought for us instead of assuming you didn't want us. I wish I'd given you the chance to grow into the father you could have been instead of deciding you'd fail before you even tried. We sat in that truth, painful, honest, necessary. Mom? Paul? Paul? We both turned. Judith stood in the hallway entrance in pajama pants and an oversized t-shirt, her eyes wide and hopeful. "Judith, sweetheart, what are you doing up?" I asked. I heard voices. She stepped closer, looking between us. Are you okay?" Paul and I exchanged a glance. And something passed between us. An understanding, a truce, maybe even the beginning of something that looked like forgiveness. "We're okay," Paul said gently. "We're just talking. Really talking. For the first time in a long time." Judith's face broke into the most beautiful smile. "Good, because I was worried you guys hated each other." "We don't hate each other," I said softly. "We never did." Paul looked at me when he said, "We just needed time to understand what we lost and what we're trying to build." Judith sat down at the table with us, and for the next hour, we talked, all three of us, about the past, the present, the future, about expectations and boundaries, and how to navigate this new reality we were building together. Eventually, Judith yawned and headed back to bed, leaving Paul and me alone again. "There's something I want to show you," Paul said, standing up. "Before you go." He led me down the hallway to a closed door I hadn't noticed before. When he opened it, I gasped. It was a bedroom, but not just any bedroom. The walls were painted a soft seafoam green. Marine biology posters hung carefully framed on the walls. A desk sat by the window, with new textbooks about ocean conservation. The bedspread was covered in coral reef patterns. "I asked Judith what she loved," Paul said quietly. "And I built her a room that honors who she is, not who I want her to be." I walked inside, running my fingers along the desk, the books, the thoughtful details that proved Paul had been listening. Really listening. "This isn't about money," I whispered, finally understanding. "This is about showing her she matters." "She matters more than anything I've ever built," Paul said. I just needed her to know that. I turned to face him, tears streaming down my face. "You really have changed, haven't you?" Paul's smile was sad and self-aware. "Losing you changed me. Finding her completed me. And now I'm just trying to become the man you both deserve." We stood there in Judith's room, a room that represented hope, second chances, and a future we were building, one painful, honest conversation at a time. "I should go," I said finally. Paul walked me to the elevator, and as I stepped inside, he said, "Abigail?" I turned back. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I don't expect anything at all. But if you're willing, could we try? To co-parent? To build something for Judith that's bigger than our past?" The question hung in the air. I looked at this man, this stranger who used to be everything, and realized something that both terrified and freed me. I didn't hate him anymore. "One step at a time," I said. Paul smiled. "One step at a time." As the elevator descended and I walked out into the cool night air, I realized I was crying. But they weren't tears of anger or grief. They were tears of something I hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was making Judith breakfast. My phone lit up with Paul's name, and something in the urgency of it, 3 rings before I could even reach for it, made my stomach drop. "Abigail." His voice was tight, controlled, the kind of calm that only comes from barely holding panic at bay. "Have you seen the news?" "What news?" I asked, setting down the spatula. "Check your phone. I'm so sorry. I didn't think I should have been more careful." My hands shook as I pulled up the browser. And there it was, plastered across every tabloid website, with headlines designed to destroy. "Billionaire CEO's secret love child exposed." Paul Guzman's hidden daughter, mother breaks silence after 15 years. Guzman Technologies scandal. Did he pay off baby mama? The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Paul and Judith leaving his building together, his hand on her shoulder, both of them laughing at something. It must have been taken last week when she stayed with him, and now it was everywhere. My blood ran cold. "Mom?" Judith appeared in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Ready for school. What's wrong?" I looked at her, my sweet, innocent 15-year-old who had no idea her private life was about to become public entertainment, and I wanted to build a wall around her so high the world could never touch her. But it was too late. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "we need to talk before you go to school." By noon, Judith was home, and I was furious. She'd walked into her first period class, to whispers and stares. By lunch, someone had taped a tabloid headline to her locker, "Billionaire's bastard." 3 girls, she thought were friends, had cornered her in the bathroom. asking if her dad was really that rich, and if she was going to be on TV. She came home in tears, and I held her while she sobbed into my shoulder, and all I could think was, this is Paul's fault. His world, his money, his fame, and now, my daughter was paying the price. When Paul called again, I didn't let him finish his first sentence. Do you see what you've done? My voice shook with rage. She was bullied, Paul. At school. They called her names. They treated her like a spectacle. I know. God, Abigail, I know. I'm devastated. I never wanted this. But it happened. Because you're Paul Guzman, and everything you touch becomes a headline. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then Paul said, voice raw. Please. Bring Judith to my office. Both of you. Let me fix this. You can't fix this, Paul. Let me try, please. I'm begging you. Something in his voice, the desperation, the genuine anguish, made me pause. 1 hour, I said. That's all you get. When we arrived at Guzman Technologies, we were escorted past a lobby full of reporters shouting questions. Paul's security team formed a wall around us, but I still heard the questions. Is she really your daughter? How much did you pay the mother? Were you hiding her all these years? Judith gripped my hand so tight I lost feeling in my fingers. Paul's office was packed, his legal team, his PR director, 3 assistants, all talking over each other about damage control and public statements and strategic messaging. The PR director, a sharp woman in her 40s, was mid-sentence when we walked in. Spin this as a heartwarming reunion story. Father and daughter reconnecting after years apart. We'll position you as the hero who... Everyone out. Paul's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent. Sir, we really need to discuss the strategy, the PR director started. I said out. Paul's expression was steel. This isn't a strategy meeting. This is my daughter's life. One by one, they filed out, leaving just the 3 of us. Paul turned to Judith, and I watched his face crumble. I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. I should have anticipated this. Judith's voice was small. They called me a bastard. The word hit Paul like a physical blow. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, eye level, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You are not a bastard. You are brilliant and brave, and the best thing that ever happened to me. And anyone who says otherwise is wrong. But the pictures were taken without our permission, and I'm going to make this right. Paul stood and turned to his desk, pressing the intercom. Jessica, get me every major news outlet. I'm giving a statement in 1 hour. No PR spin. No corporate messaging. Just me. And I want it live. Paul, what are you doing? I asked. He looked at me with eyes full of fire. I'm protecting my daughter. You know what I love about this moment? It's when a parent stops caring what the world thinks and starts caring only about what their child needs. If you've ever had to stand up for your child against judgment or cruelty, you know this feeling in your bones. Drop a comment and share your story, because when we speak up, we remind each other we're not alone. And if you're finding strength in this story, hit that subscribe button. You're part of something bigger than a video. You're part of a community. 50 minutes later, we stood in a conference room transformed into a press area. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled every seat. And Paul stood at a podium with Judith and me flanking him, not hidden, not ashamed, but present. He didn't read from notes. He didn't let his PR team pre-approve anything. He just spoke from the heart. I watched him from the side of the room, my heart in my throat. This was it, the moment he could spin this story to protect himself. Blame me. Play the victim. Let his PR team paint me as the woman who kept his child from him. But instead, my name is Paul Guzman, and yes, the reports are true. 15 years ago, I made choices I'm not proud of. I was young, ambitious, and I let fear guide me instead of love. When Judith's mother told me she was pregnant, I panicked. And instead of stepping up, I pushed her away. The room was dead silent. Abigail left because I gave her no choice. She raised our daughter alone while I built a company, and she did it with grace and strength I can only admire. Last month, Judith found me. She showed up at my office and asked one simple question. Are you really my dad? Paul's voice broke, but he didn't stop. And the answer is, yes, I am her father. And I have missed 15 years of her life because of my own cowardice, but I will not miss another day. And I will not allow the media to turn my daughter's story into entertainment. He looked directly into the cameras. Judith is a 15-year-old girl who deserves privacy, dignity, and the chance to build a relationship with her father without the world watching. So I'm asking you, all of you, to leave her alone. Leave her mother alone. If you want a story, you can have mine, but my daughter is off limits. As we moved toward the exit, a reporter in the front row shot to his feet, ignoring Paul's clear dismissal. Judith, did your mother keep you from your father for money? Did you know he was rich when you came here? I felt Judith flinch beside me, her hand gripping mine so tight it hurt. But before I could react, Paul stopped. He turned back to face the room, and when he spoke, his voice had turned to steel. That question, he said quietly, dangerously, is exactly why she's off limits. Judith is my daughter, not your headline. This press conference is over. He placed his hand protectively on Judith's shoulder, looked directly at the reporter who'd asked the question, and said one more thing. If I see one more story that disrespects my daughter or her mother, my legal team will be in touch. That's not a threat, it's a promise. Then he guided us out of that room, like we were the only people in the world who mattered. Then, he turned away from the podium, took Judith's hand, and walked out of the press conference without taking a single question. In the car afterward, Judith was quiet for a long time. Then she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Mom, did you see what he did? I saw, sweetheart. He didn't let them spin it. He didn't hide me. He protected me. Her voice cracked. He chose me. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Mom, I think I finally know who he is, Judith whispered. And I want him in my life. Really, in my life. Not just visits. I want him to be my dad. The words I'd been afraid to hear became the words I realized I'd been hoping for all along. Because Paul didn't just give a press conference that day. He showed Judith exactly what a father's love looks like. And maybe, just maybe, he showed me too. The weeks after the press conference became something I never expected. Normal. Paul called every evening at 7 to talk to Judith about her day. He showed up to her soccer games in jeans and a baseball cap, sitting in the bleachers beside me, like any other parent. He texted me respectfully before making plans, asking what worked for our schedule instead of assuming his world took priority. And slowly, so slowly, I barely noticed it happening. The three of us began building something that looked dangerously like a family. On a Thursday evening in late October, Paul invited us to his penthouse for dinner. Not a formal occasion, just pasta and conversation. Judith had been struggling with calculus homework all week, and Paul had offered to help. When we arrived, the penthouse felt different than it had before, less like a showroom and more like a home. Judith's backpack sat on the couch. Her favorite snacks filled a cabinet in the kitchen. Photos of the three of us candid shots from soccer games and coffee shop visits lined the hallway in simple frames. Paul had made space for her in his life. Real, permanent space. Okay, so derivatives, Paul said, spreading Judith's textbook across the dining table. Show me where you're stuck. I watched from the kitchen as he leaned over her shoulder, his reading glasses perched on his nose, explaining concepts with patience I'd never seen him have for anything. Judith's face scrunched in concentration, then suddenly lit up with understanding. Oh, I get it now, she exclaimed. Paul grinned like she'd just solved world hunger. See, you're brilliant. You just needed to see it from a different angle. The pride in his voice was so genuine it made my chest ache. I turned back to the salad I was making, trying to give them their moment, but I couldn't stop smiling. This was what I'd wanted for her all along, a father who showed up, who cared, who saw her intelligence and nurtured it instead of dismissing it. Abigail, do you remember Professor Chen's calculus class? Paul called from the table. I looked up. The one where you fell asleep and I had to kick you under the desk? Paul laughed, a real, full laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. You saved my academic career at least 3 times. Try 10, I said, bringing the salad to the table. Mom, you guys went to college together? Judith asked, looking between us with curiosity. We did, Paul said, his eyes meeting mine. Your mom was the smartest person in every room, still is. The compliment landed softly, unexpectedly warm. Judith's eyes sparkled with mischief. So what happened? Why'd you break up? The question hung in the air. Paul and I exchanged a glance, and in that moment, I saw 15 years of history, pain, and something that felt dangerously close to forgiveness. We were kids, I said gently, and we made mistakes, but we're figuring it out now. Together, Paul added, looking at Judith. For you. Judith smiled, and I caught her watching us with something that looked like hope. After dinner, Paul suggested we watch a movie, Judith's choice. She picked some animated film about a girl discovering her heritage, and we settled onto the couch together. Judith sat between us, Paul's arm draped along the back of the couch, my shoulder nearly touching his. Halfway through, Judith fell asleep, her head on my shoulder, her feet tucked under Paul's arm. Paul glanced over at her, then at me, and whispered, "She's perfect." "She is," I agreed. "You did that, all on your own. You made her into this incredible human being." The acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. We're doing it together now. Paul's expression softened. Yeah, we are. We sat in comfortable silence, both of us watching Judith sleep, and I realized this moment, quiet, ordinary, unremarkable, was everything I'd ever wanted. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, just presence, just showing up. Sometimes the most powerful moments aren't the dramatic ones. They're the quiet evenings on the couch, the homework help at the kitchen table, the small acts of showing up that build a life. If you've experienced the beauty of an ordinary moment that felt extraordinary, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if this story is touching your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the best gift we can give is reminding someone they're not alone in their journey. The following Saturday, Paul suggested a family outing. "There's a marine conservation exhibit at the aquarium," he said. I thought Judith might like it. The aquarium was magical. Judith dragged us from tank to tank, rattling off facts about every species with enthusiasm that made strangers smile. Paul listened intently, asking questions, genuinely interested in her passion. At the touch tank, Paul rolled up his sleeves and reached for a sea star, laughing when it tickled his palm. Judith showed him how to hold it properly, and I snapped a photo of them together, father and daughter, heads bent close, smiling. "Mom, come here," Judith called, waving me over. Paul extended his hand. "Come on, Abigail, don't be scared." "I'm not scared," I protested, but I was smiling as I joined them. Paul guided my hand into the water, his fingers warm over mine, helping me touch the sea star gently. Our eyes met, and for just a second, the years fell away. I saw the boy I used to love reflected in the man he'd become. "See?" he said softly. "Not so scary." "No," I whispered, knowing we weren't just talking about sea stars anymore. "Not so scary." Judith caught us smiling at each other and grinned so wide her dimples showed. On the drive home, Judith fell asleep in the back seat, and Paul glanced at me from the driver's seat. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me this, for letting me be part of her life, for not shutting me out when you had every right to." I looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. "She needed you. I couldn't keep you from her just because I was hurt. You're a better person than I deserve. Maybe we both needed time to become better people." Paul pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. We sat in the dark, Judith sleeping peacefully behind us, and the weight of everything unspoken settled between us. "Abigail, I need to tell you something," Paul said, his voice thick with emotion. Knowing Judith, it healed something in me I didn't know was broken. For 15 years, I felt like my life was empty, no matter how much I achieved. And then she walked into my office, and suddenly everything made sense. Tears burned behind my eyes. "Paul, I'm not the same man you left. I don't want to be." That man was broken, and selfish, and too afraid to choose love. But this man, the one sitting here now, he knows what matters. And what matters is her, and you. My breath caught. Paul turned to face me fully, his eyes searching mine in the dim light. "I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I hurt you in ways I can never fully repair. But Abigail," he reached for my hand, his touch gentle, asking permission. "Can I try again? With you too?" The question hung in the air between us, terrifying, hopeful, impossible, perfect. I looked at this man who used to be everything to me, who broke my heart, who grew into someone I never expected, and I realized something that both scared and freed me. I wanted to say yes. "Paul, the words caught in my throat, 15 years of fear and hope colliding. His thumb traced circles on my palm. You don't have to answer now. Just think about it, please. I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion choking me. Behind us, Judith stirred. Are we home? The moment broke, but something remained suspended between Paul and me, fragile, precious, waiting. As I carried a sleepy Judith inside, Paul called softly from the car. Abigail? I turned back. I meant every word. I watched him drive away, and as I closed the door behind me, I whispered into the darkness a truth I'd been too afraid to admit. So did I. For 3 days after Paul asked if he could try again, I didn't sleep. I lay awake every night staring at the ceiling, his words echoing in my mind like a song I couldn't stop humming. Can I try again? With you too? The question terrified me. Because saying yes meant risking everything I'd rebuilt. It meant opening doors I'd locked 15 years ago. It meant trusting a man who'd already broken my heart once. But saying no meant losing something I hadn't realized I wanted until he asked. On the 4th morning, I sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee and trembling hands, and Judith found me there when she came down for breakfast. Mom? She slid into the chair across from me, her eyes full of concern. You okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. You're a terrible liar. She reached across the table and took my hand. This is about Paul, isn't it? My throat tightened. How did you? I saw how you looked at him at the aquarium, and how he looked at you. Judith's smile was gentle, knowing. Mom, it's okay to be scared. I'm not scared, I lied. Yes, you are. You're terrified he'll hurt you again. She squeezed my hand. But Mom, you deserve to be happy too. The words broke something open inside me. What if I'm not enough for him? What if his world is too big, and mine is too small? And, Mom, stop. Judith's voice was firm. He doesn't want your world to be like his. He wants to be part of yours. Can't you see that? I blinked back tears. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. She smiled. You taught me to be brave. You taught me to run toward the things that scare me. Maybe it's time you did the same. Have you ever had your own child say something so wise it stopped you in your tracks? Sometimes the people we've been protecting give us permission to heal. If that resonates, let me know in the comments. And if this story is speaking to your heart, hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories when they need them most. That afternoon, I was folding laundry in the living room when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Paul standing on my porch, and my breath caught. He wasn't wearing a suit, no expensive watch, no corporate armor, just jeans, a flannel shirt, and sneakers that had seen better days. He looked younger, softer, more like the boy I remembered than the billionaire he'd become. Hi, he said quietly. Hi. Can we talk? I stepped aside, and he walked into my small living room, the one with a second-hand couch and the bookshelf I'd built myself and the family photos covering every surface. His world was glass and steel and perfection. Mine was mismatched furniture and chipped paint and love held together with duct tape and determination. But Paul looked around like he just walked into a palace. This is beautiful, he said, his eyes landing on a photo of Judith at her 8th grade graduation. This is what a home looks like. Paul, why are you here? He turned to face me, and I saw vulnerability written all over his face. Because I can't stop thinking about what I asked you. And I realized I didn't say it right. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, the worn, faded photo he'd shown me at the coffee shop. The two of us at 19, laughing on the quad. I brought this to give back to you, he said softly. I've carried it for 15 years like a talisman. Like if I kept it close enough, maybe someday I'd find my way back to the person I was when this was taken, but I don't need it anymore. He held it out to me. Because I don't want to live in the past, Abigail. I want to build a future. With you. With Judith. If you'll let me. My fingers closed around the photograph, and I felt 15 years of grief and anger and hope all pressing against my ribs at once. You said it fine. No, I didn't. He took a step closer. Abigail. I'm not asking you to fit into my life. I'm asking if I can be part of yours. I don't want to change you or your world or anything about the incredible life you've built. I just want to be in it, if you'll let me. My chest tightened. Paul, I know I don't deserve a second chance, he continued, his voice breaking. I know I hurt you in ways I can never fully fix. I chose ambition over love, success over family, and I lived with that regret every single day. But Abigail, you need to know something. He reached for my hands, his touch gentle, asking permission. Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. And finding Judith didn't just give me a daughter. It gave me the chance to become the man you always deserved. The man who shows up, the man who chooses love first, the man who knows what really matters. Tears streamed down my face. I was so angry at you for so long. You had every right to be. But somewhere along the way, my voice cracked. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being angry. And that scares me more than anything. Paul's thumb traced circles on my palm. Why does that scare you? Because if I'm not angry anymore, it means I have to feel everything else. The love I buried, the hope I killed, the dreams I convinced myself were impossible. I pulled my hands away, wrapping my arms around myself. What if we try and it doesn't work? What if we hurt each other again? What if Judith gets caught in the middle? Then we'll figure it out together, Paul said. Like we should have 15 years ago. We were kids. We're not kids now. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. We're adults who've lived enough life to know what we want. And Abigail, I want you, not the girl you were, the woman you are. Strong, brave, fierce, and so full of love, it humbles me. I sobbed ugly, broken sobs that I'd been holding back for 15 years. And Paul pulled me into his arms and held me while I cried for the girl who left, the mother who fought alone, the woman who'd been too afraid to hope. I'm sorry, he whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry for every tear, every lonely night, every moment you thought you weren't enough. You were always enough. You were everything. I don't know how long we stood there, but when I finally pulled back, my face was a mess, and my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. That's okay, Paul said. We don't have to have all the answers today. The door burst open and Judith ran in, dropping her backpack. Oh good, you're both here. I have news. I got accepted to the marine biology summer program. She froze, looking between us. Wait, did I interrupt something? Paul and I looked at each other and laughed, really laughed, and Judith's face lit up with understanding. Come here, I said, opening my arms. Judith rushed forward, and suddenly Paul's arms were around both of us. And we stood there in my small living room, three people who'd been broken and lost and separated, holding each other like we'd finally found home. I love you both, Paul said quietly. So much it terrifies me. Judith looked up at him with shining eyes. We love you too, Dad. And when she said it, when she called him Dad without hesitation, I watched Paul break and heal at the same time. Family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes, it's the one you choose to build, piece by piece, through forgiveness and courage, and showing up even when it's hard. If you've ever had to redefine what family means to you, I see you. Drop a heart emoji in the comments, so we can celebrate the families we've chosen together. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This community is your family too. Later, after Judith went upstairs to call her friends about the summer program, Paul and I sat on the porch steps watching the sunset. So, he said carefully, what are you thinking? I took a deep breath. I'm thinking, I'm willing to try. Slowly, carefully, one step at a time. Paul's smile was brighter than the setting sun. One step at a time. But Paul, I need you to understand something. I turned to face him. I'm not the girl I was. I don't need to be rescued or fixed or saved. I've built a good life, and I won't give that up for anyone. I don't want you to, he said sincerely. I just want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. And if it doesn't work, then we'll handle it with grace and honesty, because we're not kids anymore. We're parents, and Judith comes first, always. Always, I agreed. He leaned over and kissed my forehead gentle, reverent, full of promise. Thank you for this chance I don't deserve. Maybe we both deserve it, I said softly. Maybe we've both earned the right to try again. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, I realized something that made my heart soar. My daughter ran away, looking for her father. And she brought me back the man I never thought I'd see again. Not the boy who broke my heart. Not the billionaire who chose ambition over love. But the man who'd learned what really mattered. The man who showed up. The man who chose us. And maybe, just maybe, that was the second chance none of us expected, but all of us needed. A fragile, hopeful new family born not from the past, but from choice. From forgiveness. From love that refused to stay buried. And as Judith's laughter floated down from her bedroom window, and Paul's hand found mine in the gathering darkness, I whispered a prayer into the evening air. Thank you for bringing us home to each other. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about first chances. They're about the courage to try again. If this story moved you, if it made you think about second chances or forgiveness, or the families we build through choice, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment telling me what moment touched you most. And before you go, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because every week, I share stories about women who've lived long enough to know that life doesn't end when things fall apart. It just begins again, differently, beautifully. You're not just a viewer here, you're part of a sisterhood, and we're all finding our way home together.